what we've. Okay, so today I'm just going to recap what we talked about last week, so that anybody that is just joining can follow up. And I'm still going to give examples from our first class and maybe classes we took in first semester. So today we are going to be talking about development theory. And before I started, I said, since this is a sociology class, there are three core theories in sociology that as sociologists we should always stick to. Number one theory is the structural functionalism theory, which states that a society is made up of different parts, different institutions that make up the whole, and a dysfunction of one can affect the whole. So if one unit of the society is not doing well, if one unit of society is not performing well in their tasks or their duties or their responsibility, the other parts are likely to fail if they are not able to support or close up the gap. But everybody has like a unique feature to what they are doing. So the second one is interaction theory. No, the second one is conflict theory. Conflict theory is that as human beings, we are going to keep struggling for survival. Like there is no linear status in society. We'll always have the bourgeoisie and the proletariat in society, no matter how we try to live. Then the second one is symbolic interaction theory, symbolic interactionalism or symbolic interaction, which talks about human beings or different individuals in the society focus on one-on-one interactions and communications. So in general, as a sociologist, if you're trying to explain any situation that you find yourself in, you should look at it from the lens of either a structural functionalist or a conflict theorist or a symbolic interactionist, just to explain the situation you find yourself in. And last week, I used an example of the NSAS movement that happened in October 2020. And I said that if somebody that is looking at it from a structural functionalist point of view, the person will say, oh, because the police system is broken down, which is already a unit in society, it has created this chaos. If that function of society, if that institution in society was performing very well, this would have not happened. Somebody from the conflict perspective will say that there is so much inequality. Of course, NSAS was just a trigger for us to see that there's a divide in society, that we have rich and poor. If not, why would people use the opportunity to break into stores and into the mall to get stuff? A conflict theorist will explain it like that. A symbolic interactionist will come and say, oh, did you notice what was happening during the NSAS movement? People that were in that NSAS, some of them were not there for police brutality. Some of them came to create a voice for people in the LGBTQ community. Some of them came because of unemployment. They didn't really come because of police brutality alone. There were other parts. So that's the interaction going on amongst the people that attended that rally. And last week also, I talked about after that, I now moved to the theories of development itself, saying that in theories of development, I started with modernization, and I spoke about modernization and also the flaws of modernization. Modernization has three main features: the differentiation of political structure. It also has the circulation of political culture within a certain people. And three, it enhances the capacity of a society in political system. So this modernization, it actually came about from, looking at the US. When the US became a superpower, people saw them as a Western nation. They were greater than, France, some parts of the UK, and so on. The second part was the spread of communist movement. And the third part was the disintegration of European colonies, right? So when the third world nation, like we know today, or the developing nations, as we know today, started gaining their power back or having independence. These three things brought about, these three main events brought about the modernization theory, that for a society to be modern, they have to be productive. For us to say society is modern, right? And US was the benchmark. You see, children in Western world, they're better educated, they receive more welfare. The society is more productive compared to nations that are developing. So modernization theory was a theory developed to justify why we should call countries developing or third world nations, because their children are not well educated and they don't receive welfare. But in all these countries, you know, they have all of that facility moving on for them. But still in that modernization theory, there are also critics will say that modernizational theory only supports the Americanization or the Westernization of countries. That you cannot just use, oh, how Americans behave. And again, when people say how Americans behave, I like to make them understand that when the usage of Americans is United States of America, not America as the continent, because then we'll be looking at countries like Mexico, Nicaragua, and the rest of them. So that's for modernization, right? And also, we noted that modernization is an irreversible process. So once a country decides to start adopting this Western nation, their structure, their values, it's difficult for you to drop it, because again, you're engaging with organizations that you'll be engaging with organizations to come and help you build that structure in your country. So I gave an example with adoption of family planning, right? That, you know, to control our population, say, okay, the white man is doing this whole, you know, introducing family planning and everything, let's do it. And you see, back in the days, they were really advocating for it, but now they don't really talk much about it because maybe people are self-educated, but you still see it in the hospital. We cannot say, oh, we are not doing it again, because the countries that brought in those products or brought in those initiatives to support us have invested so much. So because of international relations and international interactions in the future, we don't want to jeopardize that relationship by saying, oh, this thing, we don't want it, but at least just reduce it in a subtle way. So to give you another background to modernization theory, right? Talcott Persons is also the founder of the whole structural functionalism theory in sociology. And he said that with modernization, there's a systematic process. It is also a transformative process, meaning that you have to recognize that the society is what it is because of the systems in place, because of the institutions in place. So for development to occur, we need to engage those institutions. That is all modernization is all about. Then I talked about dependency theory, and I said that it emerged in the 1950s from the Economic Commission, right? From so it was developed to explain like internal effective demands and of nations, of developing nations, first of all. Now, the reason why dependency theory was created was because nations wanted to understand what they can do as nations, not to totally rely on Western nations for their development. And they realized some key things that needed to be done. And I mentioned all of them in our last class. Just give me a moment, let me pull it up. What system? Okay, so the first one was, if a nation wants to be termed as developed, That's according to dependency theory. You must have the capacity to control the monetary exchange rates, placing more governmental emphasis on fiscal rather than monetary policy. So it's saying that countries must be able to control their exchange rates, not people manipulating, what dollar will be. You should also be a superpower, and you should also be able to manipulate what your exchange rate will be. If they want to tag your country as powerful, you should be able to have that. Another thing was you need to be able to promote effective government roles in terms of national development. As a country, what is your focus? People feel like, oh, let us just have vision and mission for just my organization. But no, America, for example, they have what they call American Dream, that an average American should be able to read and write. At a particular age, you should be able to have a house and have a car and be educated. So you need to have all of this. This is what they comprise as, oh, I have achieved my American dream. That's why you see they have a plan for their citizens to actually prosper in whatever field. Even if you decide to be a mechanic, you can still achieve the American dream. So another thing for dependency is that for a nation, you should be able to create a platform for investment so that even when, and I used a good example, we'll get to that again. So the entrance of external capital and following priority already established in national plan for development. And for this, I gave an example with Saudi Arabia. You cannot go into Saudi Arabia as a Nigerian to say that you want to invest and you think that the share capital of that company will be 70% yours. No, they will give it to the oh my God, United Arab Emirates citizen. They'll give him a larger portion than they'll give to you. Countries in Africa, they do it. I gave an example with that, Kenya. Kenya currently, if you're a foreigner, you cannot own, higher shares in Kenya. It's a Kenyan that will own it, but foreigners have found a way to manipulate it. So when we talk about the issues with development in Africa, we talk about corruption, right? So that is one of the issues with development generally. Kenyans have found a way, or foreigners have found a way to, move past it and still have, from the back doors, higher percentage than the Kenyans themselves. Another thing I mentioned just now was national development plan. As a nation, we should be focused, right? So currently in Nigeria, they say, oh, all the funds that need to come in for development should go to the northeast or the north, because the south, oh well, maybe they feel like we're developed enough. So even if an international organization is coming to Nigeria to come and invest, the first thing they're thinking about when they're talking to the government will just tell them, look for organizations in the northeast if you're doing anything around development, because that is the area as a nation that we feel is important to be developed. Another thing is you need to be able to generate larger internal demand by increasing the wages and salaries of workers. You see where people keep clamoring for, we need to increase our salaries, minimum wage in Nigeria is not great. These are the issues around it and much more. So dependency theory is also talking about how we as developing nations, we cannot really progress because we have been colonized, right? First, they talk about development of poor nations, which is self-contained. The development of third nation is a necessity of subordination to the core. So they are saying that we need to be subordinate to our colonial masters. We need to we still owe them some form of loyalty or some form. So you hear that in the conversation around, oh, why is Cameroon not doing well? Why is Ivory Coast not doing well? Because they still remit to France, right? You still have some tie with your colonial masters. You're still depending on them. And that is why the nations are not developed. Well, there are some arguments, against that theory that no. You can't say development is all about that. So a major critic of dependency theory is that a major critic, of the dependency theory and modernization is that both continue to base their assumption on results of nation states. So it's saying that, oh, whatever you get out of development is based on your results as a nation, right? And there are other theories in development that conquers dependency theory in that light. I don't know if anybody has any questions for me. I want to go into the remaining two topics. Does anybody have a question?
Kick it, full flow.
I don't have.
We're gonna set you up on the wide screen.
I just want to add one more critique to dependency theory. So dependency theories, they believe that a nation's development is tied to transnational cooperation and is only detrimental to the countries. So both modernization theory and dependency theory, they talk about like US, UK, France, all these Western nations as the core, that if we don't have them, we cannot actually achieve anything, forgetting and disregarding our own cultural values, our own uniqueness. So when you talk about modernization or dependency theory, you need to remember that one critique of this theory is that every nation is unique. Every nation, we agree that no nation can stand on its own, but at the same time, we need to also acknowledge that nations have some uniqueness to them that have made them to survive up to this point. So I don't know if he mentioned world systems theory in the list of theories that he wants us to take, but that's a theory in sociology as well. So world systems theory, it emerged from capitalism, and it looks at third world countries as a new condition in which they attempt to elevate their standard of living and improve their social condition. And for these new conditions that they're talking about is not totally related to international financial and trade system. So if you look at modernization theory and dependency theory, it's talking about trade relations. But with world systems theory and globalization, which we are going to talk about later, it doesn't talk about trade as much as those two theories. And for this one, it has three main features. It noted that East Asia, right, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, Hong Kong, Singapore, they continue to experience a remarkable rate of economic growth. And they shifted the narrative that East Asian economy is a miracle or is a manufacturing imperialism, meaning that a region can change its own trajectory. If East Asia can do it, because these countries were not so wealthy, they were not so big. So if they can do it, another country can do it. It must not be the regular westernization. And I remember when we started talking and I said China, when you think of China, when you look at their poverty is high. When you look at their investment and everything, it is also high. So that's like a dual economy, which, you know, it's not really clear to me how they manage that. Another feature of this world systems theory is that there was a widespread crisis across socialist states, which included the failure of cultural revolution, economic stagnation. You see crises that have happened over time. And these crises were because of trade wars. So if you are saying that countries should keep trading and we should keep listening to our colonial masters or aligning ourselves in terms of trade alone, we are heading towards war, which is also a potential for disaster and, you know, a red flag. If we are saying we want to be developed nations, we should also look within. This theory also states that there's unprecedented governmental deficit and widening trade gaps in the 80s. And it signaled that there's a dismissal of American culture, American capitalism, that not everybody will accept American capitalism as a way for development. And it now brought about a recognition that worldwide conditions that operate as determinant forces for small and underdeveloped nations are no longer useful categories in studying development, meaning that we are just talking about the determinant forces, what we are using to study development, small countries. But that's not all it is. That's not all it takes to study development or development conditions. That we should also pay attention to third world countries and the new global systems of communication, the new world trade mechanism, the international financial systems. We should look at the knowledge of military links. That these are another things that are coming up that are important to development. So basically, what systems theory is saying that even if we are saying third world country, it is fine, no problem. Whatever you are saying about it, it's okay. But we should not forget that there are factors that bring about greatest impact in internal development. And we should not be comparing America to North Korea, because if we want to talk about development and we put America and North Korea, we will not say North Korea is developed. We'll still say they are underdeveloped, right? But when we bring forces, the new global system, communication, we bring their military links, we bring their world trade mechanism, we bring international financial system, we will look at development in a different perspective. We'll look at these countries as brand new, and we can easily call them developed. And this world systems theory established some main assumptions. Number one, world systems theory states that there is a strong link between social science, especially among sociologists, economics, and political discipline, meaning that you need to recognize all these parts and that they interact to form a real national condition. So for example, remember in the beginning, one of the things I said was the new global system, right? International financial system, knowledge and military link, new world trade mechanism. And now the assumption is also telling us that there is a strong link between social sciences, between the sociologists, between the economists, between the political scientists, that all of them. So for North Korea to make an economic decision, they will already sit down with people that are political scientists to say, how will the US react to this? They will relate, they will come bring sociologists as well and say, okay, how will sociologists view this? What is relevant to us? Remember, dependency theory states that we should have a national plan, right? So based on their national plan, they might say, you know what, we don't care if people say that we don't pay attention to human rights in the society. That's not our core as a nation. It's not our business. So people that look at development from world systems theory will not necessarily look at things that are not in their national plan. Another assumption is, instead of addressing the analysis of each of the variables, it is necessary to study the reality of social systems. This is almost exactly what I just said. The reality of social system, meaning that this is an autocratic government. Anyhow you want to see it, is your business. Our development will go at our pace. You need to, not that you carry a long bed stick of, okay, we are putting, because again, if you were earning 100,000 in January, and in February they say you should earn 105,000, we'll look at it as progress, right? Compared to you were earning 100,000 and now you have to earn 99,999,000. You would have said, you say, oh no, something is wrong. That's what this thing is saying, that we need to address it like each of the variables. We should be able to attach countries' growth and development to their uniqueness. Don't say that, oh, because in all the worlds, I remember in HDI calculation, we talked about it, that when you put everybody in a sum, the calculation, the average is now tilted a bit, especially because of the population. So for this, they are saying that if you are addressing all the variables, comparing, you will not be able to understand the country's development. Another assumption was, it is necessary to recognize the new character of the capitalist system. For example, the approach followed by the classical political economic perspective is based on condition of capital systems. So meaning that you need to have concrete evidence and open competition, more productive patterns in industrial sectors, and you need to put groups, because you're saying that, oh, development. If you look at the yardstick for development, industrialization is there. People are talking about, oh, let's promote capitalism, right? And capitalism is an Americanized culture, it's an Americanized situation. Let's promote capitalism. Let us do like the Americans. But at the same time, you need to provide, concrete evidence to support that, okay, open competition has a relationship with development, because it's not like that in all the cases. So for World Systems School, present economic conditions are not fully explainable within traditional development theories. So what he's saying is that if you want to explain our current economic situation, and you say you want to stick to traditional development theories, that is the dependency, the modernization, to explain it, you cannot really explain fully. Because in that conversation, what are you going to talk about when they talk about the military links? That, okay, this country is not developed, fine, no problem. But how are they able to create nuclear weapons? How are they able to sustain their citizens? How is it that they don't have maternal deaths as much? Why are you calling these countries underdeveloped? So the principal difference between the world systems theory and the dependency study is that the unit of analysis in dependency theory is the nation state level, right? So the nation, dependency is saying, as Nigeria, we are not doing well because we are colonized by British, or as Ghana, we are not doing well, we are colonized by British. Ivory Coast is not doing well, colonized by France. They still hold on to, oh, you are still depending on Western nations for your development. You still go and meet them for funds to support you to alleviate poverty, things that you can even do on your own. We can, internally as a continent, we can start looking for the cures for things like malaria that affects us, not on the other side, that they might not even have experience in all of that. Now, what the difference is that dependency theory is for world system theory, is look for this is not developed. Please, you guys, just give me a minute. Okay, so he's talking about sorry. He's talking about it on the world systems level. He's talking about the whole world in itself. Then the second difference is that dependency theory is talking about structural historical models, right? That boom the nation state, things that have happened in the past. Oh, they gave Nigeria economic relief, boom, we are sufficient, we are okay. But that's alone, things that have worked in the past. But world systems approach is talking about historical dynamics of world systems that have changed the rhythm of international development conversation. It's not just talking about, structural historical model that, okay, if Nigeria wants to do this, these are the people that they can go and meet for loan. They're also recognizing that nations, remember when we're doing international politics, nations will interact with other nations will interact with other nations based on their own interests. So it's saying, let us look at the dynamics of the world. Then another difference is theoretical structure of dependency theory. It's talking about only two modes. That is only two modes of development we have. Is either we depend on foreign, is either we depend on foreign nations, or this one is just messing my pot up. Is either we depend on foreign nations or we depend on foreign institutions. But what world systems theory is talking about is that we have tri-modes, that it can be into three. We can also look at world systems. We can look at how the world is today and how interactions among countries have become. It's not something that we can control. It's totally out of our hands. Another difference is the direction of development. According to dependency school, they believe that the process is generally harmful. So when you talk about dependency theory, they are saying that, that this one that we keep depending on the UK, the US, France, another Western nation, Germany, if we want this, we run to them, is very harmful. That can't we just create this on our own? But world systems theory is talking about the possibility of upward and downward mobility in world economy, meaning that today we can be friends, tomorrow we cannot be friends. Like you can have allies here and there, and that will affect your development. If I decide to, go to war with a country and they start bombing me and all that, it can affect me. So that can happen. Like we need to understand that even if I'm depending on a country, we are not going to always be friends. There are times that things can change and it will affect my development. And remember, we said that development should be it is a process and it should be progressive if possible, right? It's progressive, it's a process. So we don't know if the process is progressive or if it's deteriorating, but we just know that development is a process. So we want that process to be upward, but world systems theory is recognizing that the process can also be downward. Then the fifth difference is that dependency theories concentrate on periphery, right? While world systems theory focus on the core, they focus on all the layers of the world. Okay, international institutions, international institutions, powerful countries, Western nations, underdeveloped nations, even nations that we classify as developing nations, they are powerful in their own rights. So they might have some resources that we also need. And when we put that in the calculation of development, then you will see that they're higher than us in some aspects. So world systems theory indicates that the main unit of analysis is the social system, which can be studied at internal level of a country and also external environment of particular nations or of a particular nation. So you can study your development internally and also externally. You cannot just say, oh, let's just keep focusing on modernization. We say if children are well educated, or if they have structures in place or institutions in place that check and balance human rights and all those things. Dependency will say, oh, if we keep depending on foreign nations, this is what is going to happen. No, you can analyze your development based on all of this. So that's all for world systems theory. Then the second to the last theory is theory of globalization. You can, think about globalization in any form, hundreds of definitions. But for this course, for this conversation, we are putting development globalization in two things when it comes to development explanation. We are looking at it from the cultural aspect and the communication worldwide. we are saying that globalization has emerged as a global mechanism that is creating integration of people, economic transactions, events together. Before I continue with this globalization piece, what's the name of the guy that, the police killed actually in the US during the lockdown? What's his name? It's coming to my mind, but I can't remember. Can somebody remind me?
George Floyd. George Floyd.
Oh, thank you, man. So when you think about globalization, right, just hold that event in your mind as we talk about this piece. Okay. So one of the most important characteristics of globalization is that it emphasizes on cultural aspects and the communication worldwide. It does not focus on economic, financial, and political ties alone. Of course, when we're talking about globalization, we must still talk about trade. We must talk about cash flow. We must talk about political influence, political ties. We must talk about that. But it does not focus on that alone. It focuses on interactions and also the increasing flexibility of technology to connect people around the world. Now, there are some aspects of globalization I want you guys to keep in mind. Number one, when you talk about globalization, we need to recognize that global communication systems are gaining an increased importance every day. And through that process, nations are interacting, governments are talking with each other on different levels, and even the citizens of these countries are talking. Now, back to the example I say you guys should hold on to. When that stuff happened, we shared it on the internet, right? And everybody was furious. Everybody, even if on the government level, we're not seeing much interaction of international organizations coming out, international government, right? Or independent government coming out to say something. But citizens of different countries were saying, they were interacting with that global event, right? The second thing is that even though the main communication system are operating amongst more developed nations, marginal groups in poor nations can communicate and interact with global contexts. So even people in villages, they were getting that information. They were seeing that global event that had happened. And they're like, no, this cannot be happening. Even in the smallest of cities. Another thing is the modern communication system implies structural and important modification in social, economic, and cultural patterns of nations. So meaning that modernization is saying that, we should bring Western structure. It's going to come either ways. That's what globalization is saying. Whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. So modernization theory cannot just tell us to throw away our values. Let us just, move at a slow pace. It's still going to happen regardless. And it's saying that, this modification is going to come socially, economically, and culturally. We are going to see it in all the patterns. So people will say, oh, children of nowadays, they don't have respect, Generation Z. And that's because we are now interacting with Western nations and already taking that culture that modernization theorists are saying we don't want to lose. Our uniqueness, we don't want to lose. That is the same thing that will still happen when we talk about globalization. And it becomes more accessible. It doesn't go any less. It becomes more accessible. There's economic transactions. People are using PayPal. People are using, trading products. People are doing things. There's a cultural perspective to all of this. Another thing globalization is saying is that the concept of minority within particular nations is being affected by these new patterns of communication. that these minorities are not completely integrated into the new world system of communication. So political elites, business elites, right? They will continue to be decision makers in developing nations. So why you are complaining that development is not happening? Before we get the phones that you are saying to my small village in Akoko Edo, people in the city would have gotten it. They would have made economic moves to change their own trajectory, to change their life. Before it gets to the person in Akoko Edo, before they'll say, okay, oh, so this I should buy data. Okay, when I buy data, I'll now browse, I'll now spend so and so online, learn how to do Bitcoin, learn how to trade. Before they do all of that, the world has moved. So if we're talking about development in terms of globalization, we should already know that, communication and access is a problem. Yes, the world is moving, changing rapidly, but at the same time, events are happening that are changing the mindset of people continuously. And it's seriously affecting what development will look like. So before we finish saying that, oh, okay, development, when they say a country is developed, each citizen must have a laptop. Before Nigeria finished buying all the laptops, America have released another one. In fact, we have specified, we don't just want laptops, we want them to be Apple. Before Nigeria will say, okay, let's go and get Apple, they'll say, oh, we put a chip in everybody's brain. No need. So if you want to talk about development from a globalization perspective, you need to identify that this thing will keep changing. And based on access, availability, knowledge, economic factor, social factor, interaction, communication. Then the last thing about this is cultural elements will dictate the form of economic and social structure in each country, meaning that the dominant culture in that country will still rule regardless. They say China, they have their own Facebook, they have their own email, they have their own this, they have their own that. That's because no matter how you want to globalize, no matter what you want to do, the dominant culture, what the people have said it will be, what their government have put a hold on, that is what it will be. So for people that are saying dependency theory, oh, let's rely on other nations, they can support us, they can do this, you are flawed. Because yes, we are relying on other nations, but we as a nation, we still decide if this is the kind of thing that we want to see in our nation. So those are the things. Then the main assumption of theory of globalization are these. Number one, cultural factors are the determinants in every society. So no matter how you want to look at it, you cannot look at it past cultural factors. They are strong determinants in every society. Number two, it is not important under current world conditions to use the nation state as the unit of analysis, since global communication and international ties are making the category less useful. So if you keep saying that, oh, Nigeria is a country, we Nigerians, people will just be looking at you that this one, does she even know what I'm talking about? Because culture is being lost here. Some people will tell you that I don't even know where home is. There's one book, is it World Without, okay, actually to World Without Borders and Nowhere to Call Home. Those two books, it just explains to you how a lot of people, they just travel abroad and they are so lost. You might even hear people, say it or they write it online that I want to come to Nigeria, but I feel more at home in Canada and I'm so scared of my home country, but that's where I was, giving birth to. So I lived somewhere for a while, and when people say, oh, Khatumi, Nigeria and everything, I'm always telling them that, I was raised there, I know Nigeria more than I know this place, so why? And I don't blame people that, have that mentality or have that ideology about home, and that's because they've integrated, they've adjusted, they've put their investments in these other countries, and that's how they understand it. Then the third thing is, with more standardization in technological advances, more and more social sectors will be able to connect with themselves and other groups around the world. So a good example of this is Bitcoin. You don't want to trade, you don't want to, liquid money. Everybody is moving. There is no, they want to eradicate dominant groups that, oh, it's only banks that we have the right. They want to create a paradigm shift or a world shift in the financial sector. So all those kind of things will keep happening, regardless of how you want to look at it. So to add to the globalization topic, right? I want to give you guys the features of globalization. Number one, globalization involves liberalization. Globalization stimulates free trade. Globalization enhances increase in collaboration. Globalization involves migration of people. Globalization stimulates movement of capital and investment. And lastly, globalization equally involves dissemination of information. So there's a question in our past question that says that.
No, sorry, Khatumi.
Yeah.
Please, what's your second point? You were talking about features, right? What's your second point?
Globalization stimulates free trade.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So some people say that, okay, one question from the past question, right? From the past question, it states that how do you explain, did globalization have an influence in Nigeria's development? For me, that question, I would say yes, it did. Globalization impacted our fall in local industries. So why should we produce? I think the person that takes us economic actually mentioned this point. Now, why should we keep, trying to make our own steel and all that when we can just import from China? It's cheaper. Let's just do it. And that day she said, what are the things that we import, right? And we mentioned a lot. I said toothpick, and because it's cheaper, just bring it in, right? That's one thing that globalization. So if you can write it along that line, and it will make a lot of sense.
Sorry, please come again.
I don't understand what you said.
Okay, you said does globalization have an influence in Nigeria
Nigeria's-
development, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, then you said yes, it does because globalization. You were trying to explain something there.
So globalization brought about the decline in our local industries, local manufacturing. So what has that done to us? It created a huge unemployment problem in Nigeria. So people don't have a job. So you can build on that, conflict and development. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. You can build on that.
Thank you.
So to wrap up this, globalization and world systems theory, they have some commonality. So one of them is that they take note of most recent economic changes in world structure and relations, right? So if you hear world systems theory, they're talking about take note of what's going on around us, see how countries are doing and how they're interacting with other nations. You can then use that as a yardstick to say they are developed or not. And they give so many examples. For example, the computer revolution of the 80s, right? It made it possible to carry out faster calculations, transactions, exchange rate values, investments, and all those stuff. Another one is in the 90s. The main challenge was the internet age, right? Allowing free access of information and communication. So take note of all those changes that have happened that have impacted development in one way or the other. So a country, you know, they didn't get the memo on time, maybe because they don't have satellites to get the information. So their own is coming by sea. So by the time the letter gets there, what they wanted, like I use an example, America has given us the yardstick since we are using Western calculator now to calculate what development is. America has told us that if everybody has a laptop, Nigeria has got to go and get laptop. Next they say no, it's Apple, because that's actually what's happening in development space, right? Every day it keeps changing. Today MDGs, tomorrow SDGs, it keeps changing. There is a United Nations meeting every year to say, okay, what can we remove, what can we add, what can we do, and all of this. And it's too much. Sometimes it's even overwhelming for developed nations. But yeah, so globalization studies like new concepts, definitions, hypotheses, cultural variables to understand development. Globalization also studies interaction among different levels of powers from nations and to social systems. Globalization studies minority groups as well in each state, society, and how they communicate. So that's all for globalization. So the four main theories. Okay, sorry, I'm tired. The fifth one is feminist theory. But I don't know if the man included it in what he's going to teach us. And feminist theory is a little bit dicey when it comes to development. I'm just going to touch on it a little bit so that we can have an understanding of what it is, just in case, we are looking for more theories. So according to feminist theories, they believe that if we empower women, or if we look more into gender empowerment, when we're talking about explanation of what is development, we also agree that we see development as an empowerment, right? So when we talked about development as economic growth, development as empowerment, development as freedom, development as socioeconomic empowerment as well. What were the other ones? Can somebody tell me the other ones? Can somebody throw it in here? Oh. Please, now someone should just.
Sorry, Khatumi, I was lost. What do you need? Sorry, I was lost. What do you need?
Okay, so I said that I want to tell you guys about feminist theory in development. So under development theory, right? So I don't know if you include it, but feminist theory, has its own explanation when it comes to development. And I said that when we were talking about definition of development, we said development as empowerment, development as economic growth, that somebody should add more. Development is what again?
Distributive justice.
Distributive justice, modernization, and all that. Okay. So in feminist theory, it comes from development as popular empowerment. And under that, it looks at gender empowerment, stating that how we empower a certain group, a certain gender, right, can, or a particular sex of people or group of people can in turn affect the development of the nation. So saying that, and it's based on three things: equity, participation, and sustainable development. That if we put women in power, or if we put them in positions that they can make decisions around development, that we'll see a difference in our sustainable development, our participation, and our equity. Meaning that political participation, women will be there, right? Education, women will be there. Health sector, women will be there. So even when decisions are being made, women will have, good ideas, good view. So that adage that says that if a nation should grow, if you educate a woman, you've educated the nation, right? So that is what they are banking on. And feminist theory seeks to uncover three things, right? They stand on the persuasiveness of a particular gender. Can't you see teen pregnancy? Can't you see women are not doing, they put them in power and you see the difference they can make. But a criticism to feminist theory is that all these Western nations, modernization have told us now that we should collect this thing, we should put women in power. We are not arguing. But all these Western nations that have already done it, they still have some developmental challenges. Of course, there are places you go to in America and there's no light. There are places you go to in America and people, hey, you will not even believe you're in America. You'll be like, is this not Yanokwaja? So why are we now using that model? And again, okay, you are telling us women who, is it not Madweke Allison that stole a lot of money from Nigeria? What do you mean that women will make that difference in society? Sometimes feminist theory in development doesn't hold water at all. So welcome to my TED Talk. I'm done for today, people. It was nice talking to you all. Do you guys have any questions? I'm too tired today, please forgive me.